there are some really tragic things that have happened that have caught our attention, and we were wondering, is there a way to look at this from a mental health standpoint? When that idea comes up, we always think of calling Dr. Rick. Dr. Rick is our conservative shrink. He listens to the program. He calls in on occasion, and on occasion we like to call Dr. Rick and get his perspective on things. How are you this morning?
It should be noted we pay for the call either way.
That's right.
Yeah, if he calls in, it's toll-free, and when we call him, it's on our dime.
Hey, Dr. Rick, how are you?
Good morning, guys, and thank you for paying for the call.
That's right. Well, that's the kind of people we are. All right, so let's talk about this. Three really tragic incidents. The common thread is, it seems, from my perspective, that we have three troubled or angry young men. Something going on with those three young men. What do you see? Is there a common thread there?
Well, first, I think it's important to note that overall, from 2000 to 2011, crime and homicide was down,
yes,
and 2010
was true.
The lowest.
Yeah.
So I think there's a difference between perception and reality. Now, there has been an uptick in 2012, and maybe it's continuing. So in terms of looking at broader strokes, but in terms of individual cases, well, it's not appropriate for me to speak to an individual case, but what people will see is that, one, these are very complex situations. Two, that rarely are these things in a vacuum, that, the person was absolutely without showing any signs, and then all of a sudden picks up a gun or starts stabbing. I think it's already starting to come out in both situations that there were clearly signs, and maybe in one situation, criminal record, hanging around with people that in fact the neighbors didn't want to be over when his friends were there because they were, quote, a rough crowd. So it's not as if all of a sudden it took people by surprise. Maybe the violence piece of it, but even there, it might be predictors. And then with Mr. Virginia State Senator Craig Deeds,
right.
That's another situation of where we had known mental illness in play, and that's the other thing, that not every single bad act reflects mental illness. So it's a complex situation, but I think overall, what for me, and I'm so glad you guys are bringing this up instead of just focusing on get rid of guns, get rid of problems, which you don't. The focus is on how to help people be more educated, to be more attuned to signs, to lessen the stigma of a true medical condition when it is mental illness. And when it's not, then to even look at that in terms of, from my perspective, the structure of the family and the dissolution of the family, and of faith and morals and those type of things that act as the fences around our behavior.
But thank you, Dr. Rick. But I see a common thread here too, and we can go back to the Adam Lanza issue. We can go to the Aurora shooter. In many cases, these are men who are young adults. They are no longer minors, but they are either still living at home and they still have a strong relationship with their parents. But because they are adults, the parents, they can't just take them to a mental institution and they have their own individual rights at this point. The parents don't have, jurisdiction over them or custodianship of them. What is a parent to do if a parent is seeing signs with their young adult child, and the law prohibits them from taking, definitive action?
Well, I don't think it's that black and white. It depends on the state, and that's where Senator Craig Deeds is coming in with, certainly beyond a 4 or 6 hour hold. I mean, there are steps you can take. It's the balance protecting.
Let's explain that real fast. Right now in Virginia, the law is that a person can be taken into custody against their will for 4 to 6 hours for evaluation, which is a very, very short period of time. Many states have up to 72 hours.
Absolutely. I mean, when I'm trying to get someone hospitalized, and I'm in the business, basically I've taken my entire day out of play just for one person. It is that hard. It is that much of a shortage of mental health. The insurance companies have basically forced practitioners out. Unfortunately, I take no insurance.
Right.
Most of the people I know don't. But to answer the question in terms of the parent, there are steps you can take. There is a legal process that now it is a high threshold. But some of these cases, there were some serious signs. At the very least, for gun owners, you secure your guns. And even for patients of mine who are going through rough periods, they will give their guns to friends. They will have someone change the lock on their safe. So there are absolutely things you can do.
Let me ask you this question, and look, I know this is a controversial idea in some quarters, but it just makes sense to me. So many times it seems to be young men who do heinous things, and I also notice that a lot of young men play these violent video games, which I feel, just from my perspective, coarsen the individual and numb them to violence. Do you think that's a factor in any of this?
You know, I used to think that, and I had heard that actually the video games, when these guys got to basic training, if they went into the military, it caused them to shoot too much, and when they usually would have to train people to go against their natural inclination not to shoot a human target. But in preparation for today, I went to Freakonomics, one of my favorite sites, and there's a study out there showing it may decrease violence. So I think perception versus reality, that's why we do studies. And it's important for us to make law and to put our resources into what really is happening. And, you know, the devil's in the details, and that's what makes it so hard. The 24-hour news cycle, we have these horrendous cases that you see, and then you think, wow, it's happening frequently.
Yeah.
But frankly, the mass shootings have not really been that much greater. So, I mean, it's just that it's always in your face.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rick. I really appreciate you joining us. Listen, there are no easy solutions to this. That's the thing. This is a tough issue, and we are continuing the conversation about it. The easy answer, which actually isn't an answer, but it makes people feel good, is, well, let's just ban guns. And that sounds easy, but of course, that doesn't actually stop these things from happening. That's why we're continuing the conversation.